right. There's that funky bass line. Welcome back, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening to Coast-to-Coast EVs, your fortnightly fast charge on electric vehicles and infrastructure. Joined this evening with a very special guest, Landon from the Arkansas eTraveler channel. Welcome, Landon. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This is a full circle moment for me, as it was none other than this group that ultimately encouraged me by means of just having a show and showing me the side of EVs to take the plunge, and then really kind of getting somewhat back to my media roots to create a YouTube channel about it. So I am just beside myself and thrilled to be here.
Fabulous. We're very happy to have you, and there's a lot of topics to cover in the middle of the country, as you know, so we'll be getting onto that as we progress through the hour here. In the meantime, as I might say, we are Coast-to-Coast EVs, and we have an audio-only version the following day, usually on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple, and all the usual places by around lunchtime, depending on my schedule, which has been all over the place at the moment. So hopefully that continues tomorrow and we get into audio-only mode pretty quickly. I'm joined obviously by my fellow co-hosts, Mr. Eric Way, the News Coolum channel over there in Northern California, and Mr. Walter Schulte of the Network Architect channel, still prolific, still putting out content more, I think, than I've done in probably one quarter. He's done in the last week or two, so go and check out the Network Architect channel. Fancy new logo, everything looks good over there. So congrats, Walter, for the redesign for 2025.
I had no part of it, but I did put it on my new microphone. So I've got a reporter microphone with the new logo all ready to go. And I'm not afraid to use it either.
All those legacy OEMs better watch out. He'll be coming to a charging station near you very soon. So this evening, the news is widespread. There's plenty to talk about. I think we're going to go around just quickly and hit everybody's news items, anything you want to discuss. I'll be watching in the comments for anything you want to talk about. Suggestions welcome. Just let us know where you are, what you drive, and what you want to talk about. But I will pass to Walter, I think, initially here, just to spin us off with some news.
Certainly. I was watching an out-of-spec podcast, which I typically do, and there was reporting concerning the price of the RAN network significantly increasing. And it was rather a terrifying thing to watch, because in very pointed detail, and I forgot the name of the person who was being interviewed by Isaiah, and I apologize for not being able to call him out, but he did a terrific job of tracking the price and table form of all the Rivian Adventure networks and the delta that was occurring. And it wasn't isolated to a given area of the country. It was all over the place. And the increase wasn't like a nickel, and the increase wasn't like a dime. It was more like 20 cents going up, in some places even more, which puts it into very high inflated regions. And for Rivian, who was kind of following in the footsteps of Tesla, where the concept was having an exclusive charging network for their customers to utilize, the low-cost option, where it's quietly subsidized for owners of the brand, I guess was lost in translation, because I'm not sure what happened there. And there was no indication, as far as I could tell, of why the abrupt change, but it was rather sweeping across the entire network, and basically puts Rivian Adventure Network stations out of price range for most people, because they're going to be looking elsewhere, unless it's in one of these very remote locations like the Joshua Tree, some of the other areas. In my particular case, Cherokee, North Carolina is the location. But even in Cherokee, there's utility chargers put in by Duke Energy that are alternatives. So they're going to have to be like completely solo for many dozens of miles in order to be able to coax people to come to their stations. Like there's a right down the street from me, there's a Rivian Adventure Network station at what's known as North Lake Mall, and immediately adjacent to it is a Tesla supercharger station V3 with a brand new V4 expansion going in next to it to the tune of, I think, 18 stalls. I don't remember the exact count, but something like that. It's like in the same parking lot. I don't really know what the rationale is there. It's almost like they're purposefully shooting themselves in the foot or something. I don't know, or they're trying to grab headlines. Really, I have no idea what's going on there.
It's an odd one because, as you say, Rivian had kind of built themselves out as the the alternative network coming up, and we've only really got to a point now where they opened in December, and even that was only to, I think, at most 10 or 11 stations. Maybe that's increased a little bit in the meantime, but we're talking about over at Joshua Tree, it's more than 60 cents now for a non-Rivian vehicle to charge. The pricing beforehand for the session that I did over in New York, in Queensbury, was 53 cents per kilowatt hour. So if we're getting into 60s, that's kind of into pilot
70s.
flying.
No, 70s.
70s on those areas, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's not unheard of in some parts of Northern California, Eric, from what I've seen. But
Well,
it's
I
way,
was going to say, where are you finding all these cheap stations? 70 cents a kilowatt hour? My goodness, I'm driving there now. I think I don't know. I think Rivian also set themselves up as a premium brand, though. So and premium brand with premium locations, and if they're wanting to restrict traffic because they're not a big network, and trying to restrict traffic as much as possible to their owners, I can see this. This makes sense to me in terms of why they would want to do it. And while they do have parallels with another startup EV automaker, they never went that deep into it, right? They never got the subsidies on thousands of vehicles that they sold. And again, it's a fairly small network, probably fairly low usage. So you combine those things together, I don't know. I could see this price making sense for them. And the truth of the matter is, too, I think we're at a point now where you can pretty much ignore any individual network you want, and there's going to at least be alternatives. Pretty much no matter where you are at this point in the country, there's at least one alternative network that you could turn to, rather than having to rely on a single sole charging provider. So I don't know. Are you thinking, I guess maybe I'm confused too. Are you thinking, Walter, this might be an indicator of pricing to come for other charging providers?
I really don't know how to interpret it. It's such an abrupt change. It wasn't gradual. It was abrupt. And it was basically almost every single one of their stations increased to the tune of 30% overnight, and without warning and without reasoning even after the fact. And so it was pretty abrupt.
Maybe they were just getting slammed with usage.
Seems unlikely. You never know, though, some areas. But we have a representative from somewhere that is not necessarily these coastal abundant options that you seem to think everyone has, Eric, somehow. So
I said at least one other. At least one other. I didn't say.
You may well have pilot flying J. Okay, but what are you seeing there? I mean, you have some free charging for an unspecified amount of time now with the Walmart network, which we'll come on to, but what does pricing look like out there in Arkansas, and how does this kind of stack up with what you're seeing in the market?
And my thought on the Rivian price increase is very much like Eric's. I kind of almost feel like it was, if you want premium and you want exclusive, well, we can make that happen, but you're not going to like what we're going to do. It's like taking a vacation at Walt Disney World now, It's like the parks are too crowded. Well, we can reduce the attendance, but you're not going to like how we do it. So just jack the price up, right? They make their bottom line, and you don't have as many people at a charger. Luckily, I guess fortunately, we don't have RAN here, which really doesn't make sense because Bentonville is like the mountain biking capital of the world now, with all of the Walton money that's been put into it for mountain biking structures and infrastructure, everything that goes with that. Here it's It's fairly moderate compared to a lot of other places. How did you refer to yourself? The coastal elites. It it's fairly moderate. I will say the only issue that I have is actually with Pilot Flying J. The Springdale location is still 69 cents, and I realize that's not necessarily Pilot's issue. I think that's Entergy, the energy wholesaler for Arkansas. I think that's a little bit more of their end of the deal. Because all of them are 69 cents that are powered by Entergy in Arkansas. Electrify America, 56 cents if you can manage to find a handle that works. And so, yeah, I stick with Walmart as it does remain free. Although earlier this week I about ran out of juice trying to get to it, so I had to stop at a Francis Energy location in the heart of Springdale, Arkansas. So, and it was, I guess I didn't even look. I was in such dire straits, but it's somewhere around 50 cents as well. So it's fairly moderate compared to what I hear y'all talking about, and certainly I'm grateful for that. But I understand that that's a complex formula of, inflation and take home pay and all that thing and all of that. So it's I stick with my Walmart chargers best I can.
It'll be interesting to see where the pricing settles for them, because there's definitely a sense that there's a lot of sustainable kind of renewable energy from Walmart, right? I mean, we've seen pictures of them with the enormous solar arrays on top of the facilities. So I wonder how much of that will be potentially passed on.
Just for reference, right now, the Crossroads, Texas location that's still doing the beta testing, they're at 35 cents per kilowatt hour, and they've been there since October 21st, I believe. And that's kind of like their testing location for payment method as well, using the Walmart app. So it's been very, very stable there. I kind of wonder if that's an introductory price, but I also kind of think now, given that Tesla lowered their prices a few weeks to about a month ago, that maybe that is where they'll stay, just to remain competitive. You go to your local Walmart at an exit or whatever, and you look at the gas price, it's typically among the lowest, if not the lowest, at that exit. And that's by design, to get you into the store, or at least get you in close proximity. But I think that EV customers will be kind of looped into that as well, and see a benefit, especially I tend to think if you're a Walmart Plus member, you'll get an even bigger discount on top of that. So I think that we're about where they're going to be, personally.
Yeah,
and that drops in a whole other, to your point, Eric, that drops in a whole other piece of competition, right? You're starting to put, if that's on the scale of Walmart's plan long term, you have a Walmart next to you in most cases, and that's going to be another place to go. We see Costco in California and Denver. I think their prices lower than the standard Electrify America kind of pricing, even though they're on the same system. So
yeah, and I was going to say, Steve, maybe that's a topic for another day too. Is we've been kind of skirting around this concept of commoditizing energy costs, right? And you talk about certain automakers that run their own networks, right? Some of them are using that as a marketing, right? And so with Rivian, maybe that's what the shock is you would think that that's part of a marketing gimmick for them, but maybe not, right? Maybe their margins aren't enough to support it. Whereas you look at a Pilot Flying J, right? You'd expect them to start rolling back their prices. Sorry for the Walmart reference there, but you'd expect a Pilot Flying J to start rolling back their prices because they're commoditizing, right? They're trying to get you into that particular location, and the charging is just the selling point. Same thing with Walmart is anytime you have a higher margin business where they're doing hundreds of dollars per customer transactions each time and at a decent margin, if they're selling their energy to you at cost, that seems like a sustainable model for someone like Walmart. So
yeah, I think pricing itself is something that we can do a whole episode on. Just, I mean, especially recently with Iona starting to play with time of use pricing. They set, certain prices in their Ohio sites. I think Rove in Santa Ana just dropped their prices by about 10 cents. So it's not all going one way. For Rivian, that may be a issue that I think someone put in the comments, they need to pay back that loan, which may be premature, but it's definitely out there hanging over them, I guess. But
I've wondered if that played a role in that. Not necessarily paying back a loan, but somebody I mentioned in my Why I Became an EV Driver video about Rivian and Volkswagen, and somebody said, well, that's the first time I've ever met a Rivian hater. And I was like, well, I'm not a hater at all. Like, I'm I have some familiarity with their inner workings, actually. And to me, it seems like their network is not where they thought it would be at this point. I think if Tesla is their measuring stick, they're probably about 7, 8, maybe 9 years behind. And so I'm wondering if this is to potentially get another revenue source to keep that going, and then as it grows, reel it back in, or maybe let energy inflation or whatever comes out of the next, half decade catch up to it. I don't know what it is, but I just think that maybe the size and the condition and the expectations of the network may be playing a little bit of a role in it too.
Yeah, Landon, you're not wrong. They are very far behind their scheduled rollout. When you turn back the clock to when they said they'd have there were even news stories, FUD, but they were news stories nonetheless, that Rivian's canceling their network. They're not going to actually build it after all. They're stopping their build. So they really did slow down for a long period of time, and they even by their own calendar, the Adventure Network is probably 3 to 4 years behind what they targeted. So yeah, I think it's a fair assessment.
Okay, keep an eye on your local Adventure Network if you have one, to Eric's point, which plenty of people don't. Let me move us on quickly. We want to jump into the comments, and then Landon touched briefly on how he arrived in electric vehicles. We want to hear a little bit more about that. So let's say hello to everybody, and Crazy Postman, kind of pretty much everybody can put their hands up except maybe people in SoCal as well.
Yeah, he lost his water. He posted recently that his pipes froze.
Not good. Yes, we've had that before, and it is a long, arduous process to get out of, especially if everybody else's pipes in the neighborhood freeze. You're trying to find the one plumber who is capable of handling it. Todd Holter, 2 degrees Fahrenheit here in Minnesota, but you're used to it, I guess. Someone who may be less used to it. Cecil Martin in snowy Cary, North Carolina. Definitely hearing that from Walter and the in-laws at the moment. The cold weather is coming in. Not feeling sorry, I'm afraid, for Dennis, who's in Central Florida. I believe Michigan is also part of your stomping grounds, so I guess you're snowbirding it for a little bit here, but that chilly 75 sounds pretty good right now. Welcome, though. Mike Mahan, 72 degrees Fahrenheit, steady and standard for his area of Southern California, I believe. And Crazy Postman, currently writing a parody song for his TikTok channel. Every faucet in the house is parody of every light. I don't know what that song is.
Is that Trace Adkins back in the day?
That must be. I think this is going to get us
every
into
light in the house is on.
So, let's just say that did not make it across the Atlantic, I'm afraid. Andy in Florida, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Glad we got the funky music back indeed. Paul, 2020 Bolt, Bakersfield, California, just in from a trip to Monterey. Hope that went smoothly. Hope you got better weather than the rest of us are describing here. Scranton checking in. Sean, 19 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 7 degrees Celsius. Yeah, that all sounds pretty familiar. Good morning and good evening to electrified light vehicles. It's time zones everywhere, so we appreciate you joining us, whatever your time zone is. Brian is definitely cold, I'm sure, unless he's on one of his road trips. If he's up in Minnesota, it would be as cold as we described above. So, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Jeddah Kung Pao, hello from Michigan. I-4 M50. Nice, good times. You must be cold as well, I'm sure. Andy in Florida is in a 2021 Ford Mustang Mach-E Select and 2017 Smart 4.2. We have a few more to get through here. Thank you, everybody, for leaving where you are and what you're up to. Bashom in Buffalo, New York. That's definitely cold as well. 2024 Chevy Lyric and 2025 Equinox EV. GM Stable represent, and Walter might have stuff to talk about.
I was going to say that looks pretty familiar.
So yeah, we may be copying some people's stables here pretty soon. Dave Reed is in upstate New York, Blazer EV and Bolt EV. Nice pairing. I actually saw a used Blazer EV, believe it or not, for sale up at Greenwave Electric Vehicles today. They got it off a fleet or a test vehicle, I guess, but good to see those on lots, even if they're not qualifying for the used EV credit just yet. Scott Owens, greetings from a DC Renaissance hotel where his Hertz Polestar is presently charging for free. All of the good things, the miracle being that you managed to get a rental out of Hertz. I guess it had to be charged because it was probably at 10%. But I hope your trips are going well and your charging is smooth.
Definitely been there.
Stephen Reddish, greetings from St. Petersburg, Florida. Hopefully an EV6 owner. That sounds positive. I'm not sure what changes are, if any, on the 2025 model, but I know the Ioniq 5 owners are happy with their changes for the model year, so I hope that keeps you well and that comes through soon for you. Bill B, Tampa, Florida, demo driving a Juniper on Friday. Didn't know, I thought so. They were out in showrooms and Tesla locations. Didn't know you could demo drive them. That's excellent. Hope you enjoy. Leonard, let's see, getting into topics here, but I wonder if Walmart will compete with EA and add charges at locations with EA. Starring that one, definitely going to come back to that as we hit that with Landon here further on. And I'm just checking what else I've missed. Mario Gingras, hello from Montreal. Thank you for joining us up there. Tyler from the Average EV, good evening. Thanks for joining us. Tom Palmer, thanks for joining us. Rivian reports quarterly earnings tomorrow. All right, got to keep an eye on that. We'll maybe get a little more insight into it.
Yeah, they might put a blurb into it there.
Yeah, a bit more of that. Temperature updates coming thick and fast. I think Montreal has it beat. The -7 was the lowest I saw, in Celsius at least. But definitely Montreal's on the colder side than most of us, I'm sure. John, won't try and butcher your last name, but in Northeast Kansas, thank you for joining us. Definitely cold as well. You can see the continuing theme here. Kelvis Covis, good evening everyone from Maryland. Welcome. Ken Vogt, lots of people here tonight. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to rush through and we'll get to the topics here, but I appreciate you all putting in your details here. From Moline, Illinois, family has a 2014 Chevrolet Volt with a V, 19 Bolt with a B, 14 Tesla, and 24 Equinox EV. That is heavily GM with a little bit of Elon mixed in for good measure or bad measure, depending on your take. Welcome, thank you, and a couple more. Ron, glad you could join us. Hello from California, and almost hitting the six figures on his Porsche Taycan after a road trip to Arizona last week. Welcome. Love to see the odometer when you finally hit that. We can share it and celebrate. Hound Stuff, hello. Thank you for joining us. Doug Steventon, Bolt EUV, not the 50th state, British Columbia. Yeah, sorry about all that stuff. Or Eric and Walter, sorry, I'm just kind of sitting in a corner crying, I guess. Yeah. Everybody, thank you for joining us. That was a marathon introduction, but appreciate you all kind of weighing in and letting us know where you are. Looks like we've mostly got cold folks and the occasional happy Californian and Floridian. So welcome to you all. Landon, we want to take a trip with you. You've taken us on various trips around your part of the country, but I think the most recent video, or certainly the last one that I caught, was how you kind of moved from being a truck guy, Denali, pretty heavy duty vehicle there, and got into a Chevrolet Blazer EV. Maybe tell us a little bit about how you made that kind of switch, what the logic was, and how you found yourself creating electric vehicle videos after commuting in a gas truck for so many years.
Sure. First of all, I've always been a big GM fan. Kind of came with the territory of growing up a number 48 Lowe's Chevrolet Monte Carlo SS Jimmy Johnson fan. I've loved NASCAR for a long time, and so it just kind of there was something to it back then that I don't know if it really exists anymore, but like brand loyalty, like, you know, my driver drives this, my driver is a winner. So I kind of decided, you know, I like Chevrolet, I like GMC. My parents drove Chevrolets and GMCs, but my first vehicle was a '97 F-150 that my grandfather gave me, and so I drove that for a little while, and then it was notorious for fuel pump issues after so long, and so finally borrowed my parents' Chevy Tahoe for a while, and then a Yukon from like 2003. But in 2016, bought my first vehicle. It was a 2016 GMC Sierra SLT, pull me over red, and I guess that I drove that around pretty well. Didn't have a commute back then. Then COVID hit, and about the time that COVID hit, the transmission in that vehicle started acting a little funny. And it was like a first gen 6-speed, and some mechanics that I had where I worked in a school. I drive school buses as well as teach, and the mechanics were all GM certified, and they said, trade it in. It's you know. And the timing was right, so I went to a 2020 GMC Sierra. It was right as the new trucks were coming back from out of Mexico after being shut down. Got a good trade-in value, got a good deal, and so loved that thing. Had every bell and whistle that I could ever want, and I drove it to school across town, you know, 10 miles round trip, and so it was just me and that white frost tri-coated, you know, Denali. I love it. You know, I'm waxing poetic about it because I'm still very fond of it. But when I moved to Northwest Arkansas, my life really kind of became compartmentalized in that the area in which I worked and taught, you know, was not where I lived. So I live in Bentonville and teach down south of here in Springdale. And that vehicle was getting about a 75-mile round trip commute per day. So I'm burning through gas. And at that point, you know, coming up here in the industry area, we were fine financially with a little bit more gas. But then I kind of realized, all right, so the warranty's about to go through. And long story short, I started getting, you know, those thoughts when you're trying to go to sleep, like what happened if, and then summer of 2022 happens, and we've got calamity in Eastern Europe that's pushing up our gas prices for some reason, and I still feel blessed because, you know, I only hit 4.85 a gallon, and you know, they're Eric's shaking his head, he knows exactly what I mean. So you know, if that had happened during the winter or spring, you know, when I'm commuting instead of summer break, you know, I would have been out 125, 130 a week. And that's just not financially sustainable or viable for the goals that me and my wife have as young married, been married for almost about 5.5 years. And, you know, we have goals that are going to rely on being financially stable and financially prudent. So last summer, I just kind of realized it's time for a change. I really like my job, don't really want to give it up, and don't want to give up my house. Like, how do I reconcile these two together across a distance? And did as much research as I could. And a while back, I'd kind of come to the realization, based on the success that Tesla was having, and then Rivian as well, like my next vehicle may very well be electric. There was a lot of momentum building, and then the bipartisan bill in 2022 that created NEVI, like I remember that created a lot of momentum too. And so I pulled the trigger on it, went with my brother and my family to the local Chevrolet dealership, wanted to buy this, after a lot of research and listening to you all, this beautiful Galaxy Gray Chevrolet Blazer EV-RS that was rear-wheel drive, but it had a sunroof and it had the souped-up onboard charger and everything, and couldn't get it because it was it had been basically like custom built for the sales manager, and it was never supposed to be on the website. So, but they had the one that I had on the floor, and it was the radiant red tri-coat or tint coat, which was beautiful. And it didn't have the sunroof, and it didn't have the 190 kilowatt charger, but that was about it. And it was all-wheel drive instead of rear-wheel drive, which will pay significant dividends getting out of here this week. So made the switch, loved it. You know, the dealership experience is one that I'll never forget. And if you want to know about that later, we can talk about that, because I think that's a significant part of this whole conversation as well. But we had a charger installed. And the funny thing is, after installing it was when I discovered, you know, Walmart, and now I barely use the thing for now. So that's savings went from, you know, me anticipating going from $300 a month to about 40, 50, somewhere in there, to now it's essentially zero, you know, minus what I buy doing a site review like I did over the weekend in Bryant. So that's about it. Like, it was just a huge cost savings, and I was focusing purely on the numbers of it. But then once you start driving the thing, you're like, oh, this is fun. Like, instant torque is amazing. Being able to, you know, leave someone in the dust who makes you mad, or using acceleration as another tool for defensive driving, you know, like speeding up out of something. You know, I've done that a few times. That, you know, I'm grateful that's another tool to have as a commuter. So and then you talk about no maintenance, you know, it all made financial sense, and then it just kept giving is what I would say is the most important part of my journey. Is it met expectations and then some.
So it's interesting that that's the case. I mean, I'm starting to see a lot more of that kind of logic and reasoning put across by, you know, none other than fellow panelists here, and certainly I know Walter's been down that kind of track. But there's a lot more switching the messaging to away from the sustainability green angle that we've, you know, had hammered home for probably a decade now, and moving into that pure economics of it, and not least because there is an administration now that, you know, is not going to follow through on any of the kind of climate side. So it's kind of moved into this, how do we show people that, you know, there is much more to this than the green piece to it. Walter, what kind of resonated with you there from kind of Landon's journey and doing a lot of this before? I mean, you've been talking about it for years and the economic side of things, but you know, does that kind of sound like what you think a lot of people are going to start to come across as we get to the actual economic benefits and the sheer just technology benefits of electric vehicles?
I do. I think there's going to be a proliferation of awareness of electric vehicles that will slowly start to cascade through the culture. And I think it will be, even in the headwinds that we're discussing, turn out to be a positive year. I would also like to point out that people who are not EV curious, who are just not interested in EVs, I found it almost impossible to convince them of the benefits. It's one of those things you have to jump through the rabbit hole to see it for what it is. And nothing's nicer than the stability of fuel costs, being able to fuel in your garage if you have that opportunity available to you. And Landon hasn't had an opportunity to go to his first registration inspection. They're great fun. You'd be like, yeah, go ahead and put it in the tailpipe and check out my emissions. And it's great fun.
Well, and that's because we don't do inspections.
Oh, no. Oh,
Yeah.
you're missing out. That's always
No,
the
but I do
highlight.
shovel out $200 a year for registration. So.
Yeah, me as well. But it's always a highlight of the year when I get to go to the Jiffy Lube or whatever in order to pay the $26 to have the car inspected. But yeah, it's one of those things that when Landon was speaking, he took the plunge to EV, and on the other side, all of a sudden he realized there's no boogeyman. In fact, it's all sunshine and roses, and Bambi going through the background and things like that. It's hard to describe to someone that it's one of those things you have to experience, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I was just picturing, Landon, when the Sierra EV Denali is in your future, but that might offset some of your savings.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous truck, but the price tag is certainly a sight for sore eyes. You know, or going to make your eyes sore. It's an eyesore, I guess, is the colloquialism. But that Scout, though, you know.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to say too, yeah, that the something that you mentioned was kind of something that my parents at one point in time, I kind of put into perspective for them, because their regular drive was about what your commute was, and it's just like, you realize you're adding basically $20 to your grocery bill every time you go to the store, just in gasoline, right? So just getting out of one of those, heavy consuming vehicles. In California, we've probably seen a little bit more volatile gas prices than you have. But like you said, there's a lot going on in the world, and we have to realize that we could easily wake up tomorrow and see gas prices in the United States 2 times what they are right now. And that's something that I think people are aware of, but they put at the back of their mind because they just really don't want to think about it. They don't want to think about the fact that they could wake up tomorrow or the next day and their commute could literally be costing them 2 or 3 times what it's currently costing them, which is probably not that cheap to begin with. But yeah, it's unfortunate too about the other Blazer, because if I were to get a Blazer EV, it would be the rear wheel drive version. So just for my own curiosity, like, are you really missing that extra range, possibly that extra efficiency and charging speed, or do you think you like the all-wheel drive now? Are you just happy with it?
The thing I miss the most right now is, sitting in a snowstorm with negative temperatures forecasted, is the vehicle to load capability that has. Mine doesn't have that. Like, you had to get the souped up charger, I think. Walter may be able to speak better to that, owning a Lyric, but it was an option that came with the rear wheel drive only, because I think that it had a 93 kilowatt hour battery, or maybe it was a little more, or something like that.
It should be
mine.
Yeah, it should be the twin with the Cadillac Lyric. So it should be the same 103 kilowatt hour battery pack. Okay. And then, but yeah, maybe you're right. It might need to be that 19.2 onboard charger, kilowatt onboard charger, to do the vehicle to load.
Yeah, except for the debut edition of the Lyric, it doesn't do vehicle to load apparently yet, but all the 19.2s do.
Yeah.
So, but that easy come, easy go. What I didn't mention in that was that I actually ended up getting the one that I have for a whale of a deal, because and honestly, that's a little bit of a buffer for me when I'm doing these content videos, and somebody who owns an EGMP or something that it's like, well, 150, that's not a modern vehicle that, for charging speed, and I'm like, you get what you pay for, and let me preface this by saying that I significantly saved on it because of when I bought it, and it was about when I went in, it had a sticker of about 65,000, and after discounts and tax credits and everything, I got out of there under 41. So
All you have to do is ask those people what their average charge rate is. Then they'll look confused and shuffle away quietly. Or go back to about 81% when it hits the Korean siesta and they're charging at 5 kilowatts and go, oh, my laser gets 20 times that.
Yeah, well, and Steve, you and I have talked about this too. I'm not convinced that even a majority of the people need a car that can charge to 80% in 15 minutes.
It's done before we are, typically. I've been starting to realize that about 150, 175 is pretty good sweet spot. I mean, as long as it maintains it, all about the charge curve, right? But if you get a solid average at that level, it's a good charge stop for today, at least. I don't know how that's going in future, but it's fine right now.
I'm sure we'll get into it later, but like this weekend, the trip we're taking, like one of the destinations is a Buc-ee's. I'd like a 100 kilowatt onboard charger there. That way I'm not paying a stall fee for when it's done,
Yeah, it's true. There are plenty of places that I've been where I've had to get out and interrupt our family meal to go and move the car to not be that, pain in the backside who's blocking a stall at 95, 98%. Yeah, I mean, we do want to move on. It is good to hear, though. I mean, I think the understanding how people are, buying vehicles now and moving away from this kind of way we've sold them in the past, and what is going to be a very hard sell in future here on the sustainability side for a lot of mainstream buyers. The economics is not a hard sell. Once we start to get into volatile gas prices again, once things start to get less rosy on the economic side, it's pretty easy to start making the economic case for an EV, especially when the deals are as good as some of the ones you've described.
And I'll say I'm also fairly privy to the environmental part of this as well. Environmental studies have been a big part of me as a teacher. My first real 9-to-5 job was working at Animal Kingdom in Disney 11 years ago. And of course, that's the epitome of understanding your connection with the environment. So it's not lost on me that there are tremendous benefits to that. But I always try to, when I have this conversation with people, I always just tell them, like, look, there's enough highway and there's enough need for all kinds of vehicles. Like, I don't want an electric snow plow going through my cul-de-sac. It will not work today, I promise you. Like, there are applications for gasoline that electric is just not going to meet right now, and that's fine. But commuting is a tremendous application that electric vehicles can come in and make the quality of the drive, make the quality of your life better. So I think that a lot of people just have to, go through the questions of, like, what are my priorities when searching for a vehicle? And so I've had several people talk to me about this ever since I, personally revealed about the Arkansas eTraveler and everything, and they've been pleasant conversations. And no one's, because I like to think I keep good company, no one's really hissed in my face about it, but a lot of people have been curious, like, are you really saving that much? My Jeep uses $450 of gas a month, and I was like, well, let me introduce you to this channel I know, and so it's just there's a lot of angles for people to come at this from, but you cannot deny the economic one.
Go ahead, Eric.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, and you're right. You can't, Landon, you can't deny the environmental one too. And that's the thing that I think I would hope people understood better, because, regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, most people want to protect their local environment. And, we have this conversation about greenhouse gases and whether the footprint of an EV is that different than a hybrid or a gas car. It is, but we could set that aside for a moment, and just the localized pollution is so much lower when you're driving an electric vehicle, right? And I mean, the easy analogy is, okay, park your gas car in the garage, keep it running, and close all the doors, right? Like you're not going to do that, but an electric vehicle you can, and the reason is it's just emitting less locally, right? So if you care about where you live, right, and that picture behind me, you know, it's taken not too far from where I am. It's countryside, it's clean. People want to keep it that way, right? And so, you know, you don't have your particulate pollutants, you don't have your criterion pollutants, you don't have the things that, you know, affect you in your local environment. So there is actually an immediate health benefit to it too, and that's something that I think gets overlooked in this conversation about climate change and greenhouse gases and all of those other things, not to mention noise pollution too. So
to link it to you know, the cold and the winter, you only have to go back 2 years to that icy Arctic blast down in Texas, which crippled, you know, the power grid at the time and meant them come into a lot of upgrades. But you know, people died in that trying to run generators, carbon monoxide poisoning, and that was one of the first kind of periods where we started to get the stories of the Ford Pro Power. You know, I think in some cases it was hybrids as well. But you know, any vehicle that could output power, they were starting to use that feature for powering their homes and keeping the lights on and heating. That's where you start to get, you know, a lot of the extra benefits of electric vehicles in winter that often get overlooked in favor of, well, shorter range, charging is a bit of a bear, and these kind of things. So it's important to remember, you know, a lot of these things, especially in winter, there's a lot going for it at the same time as all the other benefits that we've talked about economically. Do you want to shift gears a bit, move up to infrastructure? We titled this one, or I titled this one, without any due process or kind of democracy, but electrifying the Heartland. I've had a really nice, extensive conversation with Landon about Arkansas Navy, which pretty much got nuked about a week later. So it was topical for at least 10 minutes before there were changes in the waters.
No good deed goes unpunished.
Yeah, so but it was a fun conversation, and we got to kind of shoot the breeze on Arkansas infrastructure as well a little bit. I think we'll move on to Walmart in a little bit after this, but I'd love to kind of hear, Landon, what you're seeing on the Arkansas side of things in the travels that you take, where you travel, the networks that are popping up, the way it feels to you, whether you plan a road trip or you just take a road trip and see what pops up. What's it like taking a road trip in the middle of the country there?
It's a lot simpler than I really thought it was going to be, even when I signed the dotted line on my Blazer EV. Now, is it where we want it to be? Absolutely not. There's some huge oversights, I think, in specifically the state of Arkansas, and I could talk about some of those later. But no, you can easily travel any of the, well, I guess we don't call them alternative fuel corridors anymore, but those highways, right, that that were, you know, basically designated for this. So in Arkansas, you've got about 4 or 5 different interstates that connect most portions of the state, with the exception of the southeast corner, which is trying to become a thoroughfare, basically for the new Interstate 69 from Canada down to Mexico. And so you can get where you need to go. Like it's not like you're going to be wandering aimlessly in the desert for 40 years and then just hope that your battery makes it, or you have to plug in your level 1 at a Good Samaritan's house or something. You can get to where you need to go. Now, you have to show quite a bit of diligence in some of those areas, but I think that that's a common refrain for a lot of areas of the country still. And so if you're taking the main corridors, I-40, I-30, you're good. You're covered. I-49, the southern portion, was going to be helped out by a Love's that won a NEVI award, so I'm interested to see what Love's does there. There was going to be a Tesla NEVI award in the town of Alma that was going to help out there. So the northern portion where I'm at is pretty good, with the exception of Fayetteville. I do not understand why the town of Fayetteville, over 100,000, does not and has an SEC school in it, does not have a DC fast charger in it. I don't get it. But our area, I can think of 4 or 5 DC fast chargers that will service you here and get you up to Kansas City easily. And then you kind of pick up on Joplin's infrastructure with EVgo and Pilot Flying J. There are 2 Tesla superchargers through there, and then you kind of get into Peculiar, Missouri's Pilot Flying J, and then you're in the metropolitan area up there. So it requires a lot of diligence, but it is very traversable. Luckily, from what I've seen, maybe with the exception of like Kia, I don't know. It seems like everybody has competent route software now, and maybe even Kia's has improved from the days of seeing those videos. It seems like people can easily put in their destination and traverse even a state like Arkansas that's still admittedly growing in its EV infrastructure.
So, I mean, it sounds very different to when I went down there, 2020, I guess. And the RV plugs were definitely on my radar. As I was driving through that towards Texas, and thinking it was only Electrify America back then, and they were actually okay at the time. It was early days for that equipment, but from the sounds of it, that equipment still lingers there. From what we've spoken about, it's the older units, the first wave installs, 2018, 2019. So it worked for me, but I think I'm hearing from you and certainly people in that region that it's starting to feel very dated, breaking down. It's not uncommon to have, we've kind of not ridden to the defense of Electrify America here, but we've certainly said our experience is better than the news media reports. But from what I've heard in your area, it's more like that common old broken hardware. Right.
The video that I wanted to shoot that actually inspired the NEVI video that you and I did, I actually never got to do it because, well, now NEVI's not a part of this anymore, but I may go back and do it one. But the intro was going to be me pulling up to the EA station in Rogers and then recreating the guy in Jurassic Park fumbling with his glasses, shaking and taking them off, and then pan to the ABB EA station. Because that's exactly what they are. They are just dinosaurs that are haunting you every time you see their green glow from the interstate. Half of them don't work. Now, I tried to give EA some credit here because in the time from when I bought that vehicle until last November, at one point, 3 were down, and the one that was online was derated to 20 kilowatts. Okay, and that's what kind of stirred in me this whole NEVI conversation. Like, that was this charger that NEVI was relying on to bridge a 50-mile gap from charger to charger. If that had happened, we would have been in trouble. Like, that would have been awful for anybody, and I wouldn't blame anybody if they didn't want to take I-49 through Northwest Arkansas again. So what's happening now is I called EA and said, hey, this is an issue, and I thought they sent somebody out because, like, all of a sudden all 4 were online through December, and then mid-January I looked again and 2 of them were out. So I think this is a common refrain for the older units that eventually get pulled out and replaced with the BTC one handle, all 350, balanced set. It just needs to happen here. I will say the other EA locations that I visited in the state, Forest City and Little Rock, they're both Signets, and they actually do just fine. I mean, they look like dinosaurs, but they run like ponies. So they actually do really well. For whatever reason, it's these ABBs in Northwest Arkansas that just cannot get it together.
Yeah, and that's kind of interesting because from my perspective, it's almost the opposite. in California. The Signet units were usually the more problematic, and the ABB were better. But just overall, though, Landon, what I'd be curious is, we're talking about those upgrades to Electrify America is doing to their units. How far along are they in Arkansas? I haven't checked just the total sites. Like how many of them would you say have been upgraded? Because my understanding is EA wants to eventually upgrade all of their sites to the new hardware. Oh, none?
Zero.
Okay.
So ABB in Northwest Arkansas, Little Rock has Signet. I think Hope, Arkansas has Signet, and Forest City has Signet. Now, again, I don't have any beef with the Signet chargers at all. For the longest, the one in Forest City was, it charged my vehicle faster than the Mercedes-Benz and high power charger did in Athens, Alabama, and those were ChargePoint Express Pluses. So, it was could take a licking and keep on ticking, I guess. It just really, they were really reliable here. But I think we're kind of getting to that point to where I'm done with the MacGyvering, and I hope EA is too. Like we really have got, you're probably spending more money trying to repair these things than if you would just replace them. I have to imagine that costs have come down in manufacturing these things. That's the way technology typically goes. I have to imagine the cost in manufacturing new ones has come down to where it could prove and, to pay for itself to replace them in a little bit.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think a lot of these charging providers are still operating on heat maps, though. So if they see Arkansas as a lower EV population of ownership, then, because I want to say California, it seems like they've been pretty active. But then again, for me, it's going to be a warped perspective because half of their funding is supposed to go to California anyway. So,
and speaking to the funding, it's this entire cycle. It comes to an end next year, I think it is. But this entire cycle now is being spent on retrofitting and upgrades. There's no more money essentially allocated. I'm sure there's no overlap. There are new sites coming online. They're still opening things, as you can see in Walter's weekly reports.
Yeah, new ones coming this week.
Yeah, so they're still there, but I'm guessing that's the kind of 12 to 18 month lag, right, where they've permitted this stuff. That's the previous funding cycle or stuff they'd already spent, and everything now is focused on getting those older stations upgraded. So you should be seeing it come. It's just, what that means in terms of what the opportunity cost of what they could have built by putting in another 2, 3, 4 stations across Arkansas and contributing to that kind of gap filling.
Well, and I'll say this: if we're done with NEVI, well, that just tipped their hand, right? Because everybody saw their plans. Everybody saw where good locations would be for chargers to be. Like, snipe it. Like, let private industry take those ideas and run with them. It is what I hope happens. But it's almost like, I guess, depending on how fruitful you think the efforts of the government are, but like they did the work for you in trying to figure out where these locations should be. Because for all it is, these locations in Arkansas, the travel corridors, they're not desolate. They're not passersby, or they're not in unpopulated. They may be in unpopulated areas, but the interstate themselves are bringing in a ton of traffic. I-40 is coast to coast. I-55 is Chicago to New Orleans. I-49 is Kansas City all the way to New Orleans. Like, there's a ton of traffic that goes through there. I-30, Dallas to Little Rock. So I get that, it may not be Arkansans who are going to be plugging in 100% of the time, but it will be Texans, it will be Tennesseans, it will be people in Missouri, Missourians. So, like, it's just, I advocate for people to visit and to be a part of this great natural state through my channel. But it's not lost on me that this is a very transient and mobile area of the world. I think maybe if you saw the West Memphis site review, I mentioned that transportation makes that area go round, even on the Mississippi River, or the FedEx World Headquarters and Hub in Memphis. The interstates themselves, intermodal yards, Burlington Northern, Union Pacific. Like there's a ton of movement through there. I have to think that people who are moving through are driving their EVs. They need a place to charge. So I'm hoping that people, these providers like EA, kind of look at this and go, maybe they were onto something with these alternative fuel corridors. I'll take that one.
Yeah. Yeah, and Landon, I think that's been that big disconnect with a lot of these charging providers is we don't need, as EV owners, we don't need the chargers where we are. So if
Right.
you're basing your build out on a heat map of where we live, you're missing the point. I don't need it here. I need it halfway between here and where I'm going. And, so if you look at it only from the perspective of where are the EV owners, you crowd all of these chargers into a location, and then you make travel between those locations nearly impossible because you've completely overlooked those corridors. So yeah, there's definitely some validity to going into these corridor plans or build outs with a strategy or a plan. So.
And I think it's worth using that to kind of shift into the private investment. I mean, it's not going to be at these locations because it's Walmart, and they're going to go where Walmarts are, obviously. But I'd love to hand this to Walter because he's tracked the project a little bit, and then you've connected with him to kind of take it on, it being kind of born out of your area, but kind of getting a feel for where that is and what's coming next. I'll let Walter lead that one if that's okay.
Gladly. And my interest in Walmart and why it perked my interest initially was because as an information technology professional and a network engineer, there was a project a while back where they were ripping out their Cisco Wi-Fi devices and putting in a new generation of Wi-Fi device called Mist. And what they're able to do with that is location tracking to, I think it's a 3-meter precision. And so that way they could harvest the data of how many people are hanging around end caps and how long they spend there. And that data is able to be marketed to people who are prospectively requesting end cap positioning and many other things with the location precision that this provides. But that project completed so fast. And I understood what had to happen in order for that to complete. And as a network engineer, it was like frightening. I'm like, oh my God, slow down, oh my goodness. And if you go into a Walmart store now and you look up, you'll see a Juniper Mist Wi-Fi access point. So when I heard about potentially them letting this same crew loose on EV chargers, I'm like, oh dear Lord, watch out. People don't know what kind of mechanical engine is behind this team and how fast they can fly through these things. And before you know it, everything's flipped. I just want to talk about Landon's perspective really quick. I traveled, I wanted to travel in an EV across the Deep South, and it was non-traversable. In fact, just shortly before the time I was planning that trip, Kyle Connor, who could arguably be said the most hardened EV road tripper on the planet, I guess you could argue who would be more so, almost got stranded in the Deep South because there was the only thing that saved him was a dealership charger that the GM had to come out and authorize for him, and he was able to charge up his car and then continue on. But it was untraversable. And now Landon is talking about being able to reverse it. There's a couple of sites that I have my eye on. One is Meridian, Mississippi. It's a very difficult place, but there's getting ready to be a pilot flying J lit up there, spotted under construction. That will definitely open up portions of the Deep South. So there's the Mid-South, and then there's the Deep South, the Louisiana. Alabama is a completely different state now. there's so many new chargers going into Alabama, and right now Mississippi, Louisiana are definitely laggards. So there's going to have to be something in order to perforate those areas, especially the I-10 corridor going through the southern portion of those states definitely needs to be filled in. But just to hear Landon's perspective is definitely very encouraging. That the fact that now we're in the Mid-South and Deep South and it's actually traversable, it's a completely different story than it was just a few years ago. But as far as Walmart's momentum, once it's like piranha, it really is. I think we're going to see very quickly a feeding frenzy, and I think Landon will be able to speak to why there was a pause in what their published timeline was. I think we have pieced that story together pretty well.
So we went from honey badger don't care to piranhas. Okay.
I always try to interject some kind of animal, right?
Evolving theme through the just like his dining choices. We went from brisket to blueberry pie. I'm not sure what we're on at the moment, but
Well, there was the meatloaf in there in the middle ground also.
I miss a lot of stuff. Sorry, Landon. On you go.
Well, I will say to your point now, is every portion of the Deep South or Mid-South easily traversable? No. There are still places, probably I would say Monticello, Arkansas, over to Greenville, Mississippi. Some of these places that they're not connected by interstates. They may not even really be connected by U.S. highways. So there's going to be some Plan C's at the dealerships needed there. But for the most part, I mean, these interstates and these corridors that were identified, I think that they're playing a huge role in making that. So I encourage anybody who can take that kind of road trip across. I mean, we've seen the I-10 race that they did at Out of Spec, and how honestly how much fun it looked. So, but anyway, so Walmart. Yeah, so it's been. The funny thing is like I signed up with Walter for this because of the proximity to Bentonville that I have, and the growing interest that I had in his weekly Pilot Flying J, and then Mercedes Benz, and then it was like Loves for a minute, and then that got passed off to Alan Yates, and he said, "Hey man, I'm getting a lot of these projects on my plate, and if anybody wants to help." And I realized, wait, I have a media background, so I was like, well, if you can give me the tools to track and everything, and I'd be more than happy. And he agreed very, very graciously. He didn't have to give that up. He could have told me, no, get lost, loser, never message me again, but he didn't. So I began to track it and realized that this had been going on for a little while. Best I could tell, it started in Bentonville with this alpha testing location. It was a Charge Point Express. Some people, I think, call them 250s. But it's 62.5 kilowatts, and you had to use Walmart's Enterprise app to access it. I drove by it, and you had to. It was clearly for associates only. And then Crossroads, Texas, and Springdale, Arkansas got on board, and that was really exciting because Springdale, obviously, it was on my commute. But then we got that Fort Worth Star-Telegram story that finally said, hey, here's the next move, and it was going to be DFW, which made perfect sense to me because there's this relationship between Northwest Arkansas and Dallas-Fort Worth. I've mentioned a couple times, telling people, like, if they have a mainstream to market idea that they want to test, they can either test it in Northwest Arkansas, really kind of tightly confined, or they can put it in the Metroplex and get a bigger draw. And
They're
so
big on their data, and I'm almost wondering if they're watching these people to see if the drop off on Amazon is noticeable or detectable for locations where they put in chargers. Because as people are showing up and charging, they're going into the store and they're spending less money with Amazon. And right now, that's the national battle that is being fought. And you could distinguish yourself by putting chargers on a property.
Right. And so I think some of the pause that we saw between that Dallas-Fort Worth article coming out and what happened late in January was a little bit of that data analysis, trying to figure out, okay, well, what is this worth to us? Because there was an article that came out later where they figured out that, hey, there is a huge demand for this. Like, I don't think they realized what they got into. Like, they said they found the demand to be surprisingly strong, I think was the quote, which I would agree. If you're going to give away the energy, I would think it's going to be surprisingly
You're
strong
going
as
to
well.
cause a riot.
Right. So they, I think they were trying to figure out, okay, what does this data mean for us? Like, what is it capable of telling us and teaching us, and what are we capable of doing with it? And so in that article that came out later in a collaboration between the New York Times and the Northwest Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, they said that they felt like charging was a standalone profitable business, and it 100% is. But if they're like me, they're going to sell me a payday and a Diet Dr. Pepper every time I'm there too. So it's well, yeah, we have this and we've really tapped into this, but we can let it be a high tide that lifts a few other ships as well. And so I think that delay that we got was data analysis, but then the really big one, I think, was the bringing on Alpitronic. I think that was a huge game changer that they really kept up their sleeve really well. And so, I don't know. I can't say if Alpitronic was their choice all along. But I kind of, find it hard to believe that they didn't know about them. So what I think they were kind of doing was what a lot of these corporate entities will do when they want to try a new market or try a new product, is let somebody else do it first, and then we'll be the ones to get it right, or we'll be the ones to learn from their mistakes. Examples of this have been like Disney cruise lines. A lot of people forget that Disney actually partnered with Big Red Ships or Big Red Cruise Lines to create a Disney-themed cruise line or cruise ship party, whatever, to figure out, are people actually interested in this? Turns out they were, and then they build Disney Cruise Lines and leave Big Red Ships behind, and they've since gone bankrupt. They did it with Disney Plus. They put all their classics on Netflix for a while just to see what the interest was. They saw that the interest was strong, and so they pulled them out and created their own streaming platform. I think what they were doing was a little bit of letting Mercedes-Benz, maybe some, maybe not BP Pulse, because I know they're only in Jacksonville, Florida, but letting some of these other people who are using Alpitronics in America. I think that's a big thing for testing Alpitronics too, and I'll maybe talk about that later. But I think they kind of wanted to see this charger in the American market for a minute to see how other people implement it, and then learn from that, and then get it right. Not to say other people got it wrong, but to make it right for Walmart. For like an example of Mercedes-Benz, you go and you have 2 CCS ports, or maybe one that only has 1 CCS port. We now have confirmation that Walmart, all of their Alpitronic hyperchargers right now have 4 handles on them. They're 2 stalls, and you can choose which one you want, NACS or CCS, but that's different. I haven't seen that before on Alpitronics. I noticed, I think it was Isaiah Without a Spec released yesterday and Walter, you were featured on it, his time at the Jacksonville opening, and you could see the Alpitronic hypercharger, like there's 4 slots for cables that are just outlined big as day. They're black on a white background. And I'm just kind of looking there going, it was there all along, So like the capability of these units, I think they were just trying to figure out, okay, let everybody kind of lay the groundwork, but when it's time for us to go, we're going to do it the way Walmart wants to do it. And to your point, I think Walmart was okay with that because they knew they had the ability to catch up and then leave you in the dust.
Frighteningly fast. They are a incredible crew. So,
yeah, and I might actually have a bit of a counterpoint to that, because and it's more from my charge point perspective than from Alpitronic. is when I remember when Walter and I were talking about this build out from Walmart, the biggest question I had is whether ChargePoint could even meet Walmart's demands. Because once Walmart gets rolling and ChargePoint is barely able to keep up with the demands just from their fleet customers. So how are they going to support Mercedes and Walmart and all of these other government contractors and fleet contractors as well? So Alpitronic, their production capacity, I think, is maybe what was the biggest selling point.
And you know, I think you and I may have discussed this on one of those videos. Just because we see Alpitronic doesn't mean I think they're necessarily done with ChargePoint. You know, I think that if they're going to build this as fast as they can, I think the time to manufacture is going to be the weak link in the chain. So you might see in a Dallas-Fort Worth market that they use Alpitronic. We know they're going to Phoenix based on another article that came out. They may use ChargePoints again, you know, and Walter made a great point on this show. Like, I feel like Walmart's relationship with ChargePoint is only getting deeper because they installed 30 or 300 level 2s over here at home office. So I still think that there is a viable relationship between Walmart and ChargePoint Express, or ChargePoint with their ChargePoint Express Pluses. And to your point, we're seeing some good versatility out of them too. They were able to remove ChargePoint, not necessarily firmware, but you know, graphic user interface, and it works through the Walmart app. Like, that's the only place that I have ever seen that particular system work with an already established application for a corporation that's not in charging. You know, the Shell app, you can flip the switch and go to recharge, right? But it already existed because they were in that space already. All they did was add another energy vector. Walmart, they're in a completely different ballgame because they don't have a gas station application, right? They have Walmart Pay for it, but you don't use Walmart Pay right now, at least, with the beta location. So I think there was a good amount of versatility and fluidity that ChargePoint showed. And I think we're seeing it out of Alpitronic too, based on how you charge there using the ChargePoint app. So the back end of all these ChargePoint providers and CPOs, like the back ends of them are really starting to, I think, coalesce.
And out of curiosity, Landon, have you seen anything new with the BrightDrop charging stalls for the home delivery anywhere going on? I know we saw one that had a ChargePoint dispenser. So I'm thinking, like you say, maybe what they'll do is out front where the customers are, they'll put an Alpitronic, but in the back they would put ChargePoint Express Plus for the home delivery, or maybe back at a depot or something.
And that makes perfect sense because I haven't seen the expansion of charging access for these BrightDrop vans. I've seen plenty of the BrightDrop vans, but Store 100 in Bentonville, still that was kind of the one that had the backstage ChargePoint Expresses, right? There was a Walmart Neighborhood Market in Rogers where you could actually use it yourself. I think that they had a pivot there, like they wanted to do BrightDrop and things there, but then they pivoted to some other way of home delivery or personal delivery of groceries that they're piloting there, because they have like numbered stalls that you back up into and then a conveyor belt brings it out. It's really weird. But oddly enough, at 4108 in Springdale, the BrightDrop van charges at those ChargePoint Express Pluses. So like the other day I was charging there to get up to, 90 or 95% because I was anticipating the storm and still had to get home. But that's the first time I've actually ever had to wait there because everybody else saw the same forecast that I did. But as about 10 minutes after I start charging, in comes the BrightDrop and he starts charging. And then I got to looking at the state of charge. I kind of peeked over, and that thing was like in the 60s and was not charging very quick at all.
They charge
come
slow,
on, man.
They charge slow.
So it just kind of depends on where you're at up here, what location you have, what's the infrastructure there. It's a mixed bag, it seems like right now. But I think that we will see some consistency as electric home delivery with Walmart in-home expands markets.
I want to catch some of the comments here. I'm doing an awful job of catching all of them, but any that I can kind of align with what we're talking about, I will do so. So Tyler at the Average EV points out you've spoken to the CEO of Alpatronic at that BP Pulse launch that Jacksonville, Florida, I think. And he mentioned one more big player they had contracts lined up with, and Landon shared the Walmart news. Very exciting. So, yeah, you're breaking news right there.
Your newsletter that you send out went out before my video, so you actually broke it.
No, but you told me about it. So straight from the horse's mouth. But that was just a good timing. But Tyler also points out Mercedes-Benz in Ashburn advertises on the units they'll have 4 plugs as well. The Mercedes-Benz thing is interesting because they've still kept the charge point operating system, right? So you're still activating the sessions regardless of the Alpatronic hardware through them. Iona is visible in ChargePoint, as far as I'm aware. It's more of a roaming agreement, I believe, but Walter, can you speak to any of that kind of operating system side?
Just what you said, that it's visible through ChargePoint. And I did happen to see, I was in a General Motors dealership yesterday for reasons yet to be revealed, that Iona is also showing up inside the Android Automotive inside GM cars as a ChargePoint operator.
I don't know how much more we can squeeze into 8 minutes. We've got Walter's news. We've got all kinds of. We haven't really even touched on Nevi yet. There's a lot out there. I think this is pertinent from Leonard because he's in the center of the country as well. If Nevi hadn't died, I was hoping to see some of those HYC 200s used in small towns with later rounds of Nevi. Maybe could still happen. I think it's worth. There are a few other comments along those lines. I think it's really worth just reiterating that Nevi is far from the breadth of EV infrastructure investment. It is huge swathes of investment going throughout there. And if you look at the percentage of what Nevi is as a part of any individual network, Pilot Flying J, somewhere between 10 and 15%. Iona, it's one award they won. Everything else that they're going to plan is going to be built out with the OEM's deep pockets. Loves may be a question mark, but they've already got a couple of stations open that were not Nevi funded, and they're building others. There's a lot of different pieces here. So, while Nevi and the funds get kind of shake out and we start to see how much of that will actually be built, which some people are saying could still be 500, 600 plus stations, it's really a small part in the overall level of investment sweeping this country. There's so much going on, and Walter's covered these projects. Eric's about to speak to them because he's breathless. It's not the end of the world by any stretch of the imagination. This is just a piece that's quite annoying at the moment from my perspective because I cover it, but there's so much more happening. It's not even a drop in the bucket.
Can I just say that if I had $1 for every failed investment plan for chargers, I'd probably be driving a Rimac. So we have. I don't want to say that losing Nevi is much ado about nothing, because like Landon, you had called out just how important their site planning was and just defining the metrics behind it. But in the greater scheme of things, if you look at it from the context of like the California Energy Commission grant sites, the same thing happened where they planned out these infrastructure, they planned out these corridors, and for the most part, they went through. But by the time they were done, they were putting in 50 kilowatt chargers when cars were charging at 150 kilowatt. Right. So it's like by the time it gets done, and we're already seeing backlash and pushback on like Pilot Flying J with their EV Go build out. But when you look at those are archetypal Nevi funded sites, 4 stalls, 150 kilowatt per stall. And people are like, I wouldn't trust going there. It's too small. It's too underpowered. Right. So when you look at what Nevi was going to provide, and maybe speaking to Steve's point here, it's a drop in the bucket compared to the overall funding. And realistically, the Nevi sites weren't going to be all that compelling unless that individual CPO decided to go above and beyond the requirements for NEVI, because 4 stalls at 150 kilowatts per stall would be like the bare minimum of acceptable public charging at this point, not to mention a year or 2 or 3 by the time they actually get put into the ground. So
it's worth pointing out, though, that there are, the people will suffer. It will be the people in the gaps that were going to be filled, because this turns it much more about, makes the EV infrastructure equation about profitability, which is a good thing. We should be getting to a point where there's revenue flowing from these things, and we look at utilization as the key to unlocking more money for future fast charging stations. But that means that
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Still getting used to the lag, but if I may, just for the greater good, Tom Malogny, I believe a day and a half ago, released a video about NEVI. I think he entitled it "The Truth of NEVI" or something like that. So he had a CEO of a company, I believe, called Perrin or something like that. His name was Bill Farrow, I believe was his name. But he had an interesting conversation with him just about educating the masses of what's hearsay, what is actually in the guidance that's been given and rescinded and everything like that with NEVI, and who is going to be most impacted by NEVI if it doesn't come to full fruition. And so honestly, that video was very, very enlightening. So I would say go to State of Charge and see Tom's video that he just put out, and you will be immensely more educated about NEVI than when you walked it. Well, maybe with the exception of Steve, but he already knows too much. But I mean, it's just,
that's a good call. Perrin, Bill, and Lauren McDonald, they have the database to end all databases for the NEVI program and a bunch of other pieces on reliability, utilization, etc. But yeah, that's those are the people to get all the way back into the pieces where there are plans being drawn up and awards being followed. Those are the folks to really know what's happening at the state DOT level for sure. We ran through a lot of time there. I'd like to go back real quickly. I think we got most of the topics in. Certainly didn't cover the entire middle of the country, as I expected we wouldn't, but gave it a good old college try. But I want to go to Dave Reed, who has long helped me on my EV adventures, to ask you his question. What are you each of you most interested to see in terms of EV developments or even speculation of EV happenings in 2025? Dave's a long-time friend of the channel, and we have Landon on as well at this point, so I want to make sure I get that opportunity to ask each of you what you think on that one. And Walter, maybe you could start.
Glad to. General Motors had a really good 2024 unexpectedly, and they also helped lift Honda and Acura with their initial EV efforts as well. I think 2025 will be absolutely spectacular, with the crowning achievement being the return of the Bolt. I think once the Bolt returns and that gets in the hands of fleet operators, I don't even know how many numbers can be cycled through. It was brought up by Misco Electric that fleet operators really don't have many political affiliations. They're all business, and economic of driving electric vehicles and fleets is unarguable. So when you have a low budget, when you have a low cost, high quality, faster charging Bolt put into a portfolio, I think the thing is just going to sell like crazy, and not to mention all the other momentum that they currently have. So right now, that's what I have my eye on.
Perfect. Thank you. Eric, how are you feeling about EV developments over the next 10 months now, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I coming from my California perspective, what I'm really most interested in is seeing the rest of the country finally getting to that point where I joked about having at least one alternative charging provider, but really getting to the point where most of these corridors throughout the country are covered by multiple. So as consumers, right, we can start making more active choices about where we choose to fuel our EVs when we're traveling, or if we need to, where we're fueling them locally. Because I think that diversity of experiences, you don't have to like the same charging locations I do. You don't have to like the same charging hardware I do or the same charging provider. But as consumers starting to have a sort of blossoming set of options, right? Because what we saw for far too long is either you drove a Tesla and you used the supercharger network, or you were stuck on Electrify America for 95% of the country, and that was your option, right? Like take it or leave it, or don't go EV. So having multiple other networks starting to branch out beyond just the regional networks, so that people can finally get a real feel for what it's like to have fueling options, similar to what you would experience if you were driving a gas car across the country.
Thank you. I hope we do get your California vibes emanating across to the Midwest and deep South, Mid-South, whatever we're calling it, South-South, I think Crazy Postman called it. Landon, I may weigh in after this, but for time purposes, definitely take us home. What are you excited about seeing this year and developments you're keeping an eye on, other than Walmart?
I don't know if excited is the right word. And I'll try to tread lightly. Tesla. It just seems a little precarious at the moment. This company that I think a lot of people thought was bulletproof at one point has had so much negative publicity that it's almost kind of getting, you just think about the people working in their office, thinking about the engineers and people who are building these, and how so much unfortunate publicity they've been kind of lumped into. So to me, and look, and I just drove my first Tesla, did a video a month or so. I loved that time. Like, I loved getting that experience with full self driving. I thought the Model Y was a spectacular vehicle. But I'm just curious to see, how does Tesla make it out on the other side of this little side mission that is going on? And so I would love to potentially have a second EV. I would love for it to be a Tesla, but I just don't know how much stability is there right now. And I mean, I could be totally talking out of my butt on that, but it just from a innocent perspective of just the casual observer of seeing what's going on, it's very, very intriguing. And I know that some people are kind of like, well, they'll be stronger on the other side, and some people think they're going to file for Chapter 11 next year if they don't make a move with the CEO. Like, I don't know. I just think that Tesla is a huge part, has played a huge part in writing the story of EV adoption. To me, they're the ones that kind of made it cool because of the technology that they put into it. I don't think that will go to waste. My prediction is that if something doesn't go positively for them soon, which today they did get a 5-star rating on the safety of the Cybertruck, woo, but then you're going to see GM swoop in. You're going to see a lot of other ones kind of just, I think, siphon off market share, and they're going to have to really work hard to get back into a conversation where they want to be. So my eye is on Tesla, and I know that's probably not the answer everybody kind of expected, but it's just, I don't know, kind of new to the area. It just seems kind of sad. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a huge piece of the headlines at the moment. It's, people are actively moving away from the brand. Maybe others are moving to it. We've definitely hit that before, and I know Walter has spoken to, maybe some people come in where others left. So it's interesting to see that side. I think from my perspective, it's actually, I don't want to touch that kind of fire at the moment, but everybody else coming in, and to Walter's point, the Bolt EV coming back, I think there are real almost European vibes, for want of a better comparison, of just getting so much competition in here. We haven't even touched on the Chinese electric vehicles, which are going to have a hard time getting in initially, but they are not going away. This worldwide kind of trend towards electric vehicles, the US isn't an island. It can't. It's coming from Canada as well. It's coming up from the south. You can't hold this at bay with tariffs and protectionism and anything else. It's going to happen. EV infrastructure continues apace. The level of competition has never been greater for the amount of models coming out, compelling vehicles. The technology is getting outstanding, with Lucid kind of filtering down with greater efficiency, solid state batteries, maybe even on the horizon. I'm starting to hear stuff about that from the likes of Hyundai and actual production models. So that's where it feels more real to me. But I wanted to end it on some positive notes, because there's so much happening in the industry, so much money flowing in, so much technology coming to the fore that is positive. I don't think it's not one that's going back in the bottle. This continues, even if there is any backsliding on individual models, manufacturers, whatever else.
Yeah, I also heard that Australia, which was long a holdout, has now reached 10%.
Yeah, even the laggard markets, which you would consider us one of them, most likely. It's all happening in a way that is very familiar, very reminiscent of the stories we saw from, if a California is a Norway, then yeah, maybe other parts of the country are still, Poland or some of the other countries that are slow to pick up, but they all get there in the end. It's all going that way. To the UK just hit 20%, going towards 25%. So all this stuff is coming forward. We've gone way over this week, so that's just a testament to the quality of the conversation, Landon. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me. It truly was a pleasure, and I hope to get to continue the conversation as well with people, comments. I'll hang around. Would love to have you over at the Arkansas eTraveler if you're not subscribed or not seeing it. Yeah.
Not Arkansas. Yeah, it's well worth checking out. I think you get a feel from Landon's kind of conversations and how he's framing his videos that there's a real good production quality there as well, and some real thought goes into those videos. So we appreciate it. We are very lucky to have you certainly tonight, but just regularly reporting from that part of the country. I do feel like the Heartland can be electrified, and you guys will be reporting on it the entire way. So thank you all for your time this evening. Sorry we didn't get to more of the comments. It was busy as usual, but we appreciate you joining in there. Hit the like button on your way out, and no noisy kitties, but somebody turn out the lights and feed the cats before you leave. Cheers, everybody, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Next one.
Happy
Cheers,
trails.
nerds.